Hello there, my name is NateFNGreat, and welcome to this edition of the Game Changer Podcast, or more specifically, this is going to be another edition of Change the F Up, where I take something and make it even better because either it was horrible or it has opportunity to be absolutely fantastic, because I'm an effing genius, no ding required. So for this week, I thought it might be kind of interesting to discuss something that has been going around as of late, and that has been the Disney live-action movies. Now, obviously, over this year, I should say, I've noticed that there's been a horrible trend of movies that have either been just unbearable, not interesting, or just absolutely rage-inducing. So I thought it might be kind of cool to try my hand in the live-action deal, because obviously now with the new Mulan coming up, they're not going to do the songs, they're not going to do the dragon. So I thought, why not try something a little bit different? So obviously, there are a couple of movies that they could still create and reanimate, or just do another live-action deal. I mean, you have Hunchback of Notre Dame, Black Cauldron, Oliver and Company, just naming a few off the bat. But this is one that is the absolute creme de la creme when it comes to Disney, because this was the very first major motion picture that they created and has been an instant classic since then. And that is the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So this is my booking of how I would do the live-action Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Disney, try to do it better. So, obviously, when you look at the story itself, it is pretty straightforward, and it also is very beautiful and majestic, especially with a lot of the colors and a lot of the backgrounds. Just, it's very well done. So, what really is there to kind of improve on this, or even is there anything to improve on this? Well, I mean, there's a couple things here. The first thing that kind of comes to mind when it comes to this is maybe there could be a small backstory on what happened to the king. I mean, in all honesty, they kind of mentioned the fact that the evil queen is more of Snow White's stepmother, so why not kind of give this idea of, well, maybe, this evil step queen was somebody that kind of what came in kind of like Lady Tremaine in Cinderella, I apologize. Maybe it's a situation where it was just a law kind of situation, doing something like that. And to be honest, maybe she's the reason why the king ultimately met his demise. Kind of do hints and stuff like that, to the point where, you see kind of why, why the queen really does not like Snow White, because in all honesty, they just only show the fact that she hates her because she's the fairest one of all, without getting more into the details of the original story, in which, that was one of the things that she tried to do, was try to make, Snow White less fair, so that she would seem like she's the fairest one of all. Kind of give a little more backstory on that. So maybe add a little more to the intro story, but don't go too crazy. Don't do a 10-20 minute deal. Like they did with Cinderella, they only did a couple of scenes here and there, but it wasn't anything where it was just oh my gosh, they had to really focus heavily on this. No, they got enough to the point where it's okay, you got the story, you got the premises, or something like that. Another thing that definitely should stand out is the fact that the prince needs a bit more of a bigger role. I mean, you only see him in 2 scenes in the original, so definitely give him a little bit more character, some more scenes, and honestly, maybe there's a point where he is looking for Snow White, where I like the fact that in the live-action remake of Cinderella, they actually gave more time to kind of bond, where they actually build a relationship, where they really do kind of make something out of what was originally nothing between the two of them in the animated one. And to be quite honest, there could be something more with that. In all honesty, I even went down this idea of maybe having a scene where the evil queen tries to seduce the prince. Obviously, she thinks that she's the fairest one of all. She wants to have this deal where she is going to be fair because she has this noble prince as her king. Something like that, where she tries to literally be that, that queen that he would quote unquote always want. And obviously the prince is going to be like, no, I can't do that because I'm in love with somebody else. And like I said, maybe have a scene where he's looking for her. Maybe there's a point where they kind of, I wouldn't say like brush, but they kind of like a near miss situation, like a kind of like a nearly miss situation, where maybe he looks through the cottage, does not really see her, and as soon as he leaves, that's when she comes back. Kind of one of those situations there. And then finally, they end up fighting each other, something like that. So it's one of those kind of situations. I think that it would definitely give the prince a little more likability, like more character, and it definitely would be one of those things that would add more to the story, so that way there's a little bit more, I guess you could say like about him, other than the fact that he's a pretty face and he can actually sing. There's more to it than that. This would be kind of a gruesome idea, but in all honesty, the first one was pretty dark in its own right. In all honesty, I would actually include the huntsman's demise. Now, in the original, a lot of people have seen, the evil queen talk to this huntsman saying that, oh, well, you're going to take her into the meadows and you will kill her. And she made this proclamation that you know the penalty for disobeying. And we never really see that threat getting fully, get fully enforced. It just was kind of one of those things where she kind of just, quote unquote, forgot about it. Or maybe it was one of the situations where she's like, well, I don't want to think about it because I want to think about getting rid of Snow White. Something like that. But in all honesty, I would actually solidify her as a villain by having the huntsman meet his demise. Now, obviously, I'm not saying definitely show him get his head decapitated or something like that. No, definitely find a situation where, where you maybe hear like his struggles, or you hear something like that. But in all honesty, is it too much to say that it would be kind of interesting to see that kind of deal? Because they literally had a Pirates of the Caribbean movie start with people getting hung, and one of them that was hung was a little child. So, yeah, honestly, it would be one of those things that would be okay. It would kind of still continue to make, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs a bit of a darker movie, but at the same time, it's one of those things where you don't feel insulted by the fluff that they put into it. So, excuse me. So that's something I would definitely put into here. Now, one thing that I can definitely stress when it comes to this is to keep the key scenes in Snow White, keep them the same, if not add on to them. So what that means is when she is going through the forest and she's seeing all these scary things, definitely find ways to make them that scary, to make them that creepy, to make them that horrifying. In all honesty, this is something that would be a parental... I mean, some people would say, like, oh, that's a general audience movie back in 1930. Nowadays, I would say that's more PG rating. I'm not saying PG-13, but definitely more of a PG rating, because I would not probably want my kids to see this by themselves. So, definitely kind of up that up again. And to be honest, I would even try to make it like a PG-13 kind of feel to it. Make it a scary deal. Make the transformation of the evil queen even scarier. I would definitely, like I said, keep some of the scenes the same. If not, maybe add a little more. Maybe add more to the scene where she finds the cottage, or maybe she tries to live in these things that the animals are trying to do for them. Kind of stuff like that. Add a little more relationship, a little more personalities to the dwarves, obviously. It would definitely be kind of interesting. And one thing that I will stress on this deal is that some of the things that should be kept the same is keep the songs in the movie. They are very crucial in this movie. It's not one of those movies that I can look at and say, hey, all these songs can go away and this movie would feel the same. No, it's the songs that do keep it very whimsical, that can keep that enjoyment going. When you hear, that song that Snow White sings where she talks about, how someday my prince will come, definitely is one of those things that should stay in there. How the Dwarfs sing the Hi-Ho song, it's great. Maybe change up the Wash song, or maybe just keep it the same. Maybe expand it a little bit more. Change it up a bit. It's one of those things where, some songs in there, maybe they can be changed up a bit. It's fine. But definitely do not go down the alley that the reanimated Grinch went, where they tried to just play the song, but they just kept words out, and it was weird. It was stupid. Just make it have that same feeling that the original had, and it's going to be a huge success. Yes, it's going to be the same thing, but you're going to add more features to it. Maybe add more story, more depth to why the dwarves, how the dwarves found each other. Maybe found a way, maybe that they're all brothers. Maybe they just have some kind of connection to one of the things. There's so much that you could go with that. It would just be absolutely fantastic. Now, here's something that I think a lot of people might not really agree with. But it is something that I would personally love to see. I would develop a bit more chemistry between Snow White and Grumpy. Because the chemistry that they have there, it's something that is a highlight of the movie, because they are such polar opposites. You have, Grumpy, who is has all the negative in the world, and here's Snow White, who's trying to be 100% positive, and she's trying to do these nice things. There's even a point where she's, saying a prayer where she wants Grumpy to like her. So, kind of build more off on that. Maybe have some more scenes with the two of them where, he doesn't see eye to eye with her. And I would even come to a point where maybe Snow White even loses her composure, where she's, where she's fed up with the fact that, Grumpy is mistreating her when all she's done has been nice. Make it organic. Make it something where you just see, the notches just turn ever so slightly with, Snow White. Again, she doesn't have to be this pale-faced, goody-goody two-show. Make her human. Make her to the point where, again, you build up the chemistry where she reaches that point where she just says, you know what? I don't care. There are 6 other people who appreciate me. If you don't, that's fine. And obviously, secretly, you saw in the movie, he does secretly care for her. So you build that up. You make that something interesting. And it's something that I think would be really great, because all the other dwarfs, they like her. So there's kind of nothing more to add on to it. But you have that kind of yin-yang deal there, and you want to see more building up to it. That is why I would say build up more chemistry between Snow White and Grumpy. Now, here's something where it gets to be kind of interesting. I would add some items from the original Snow White. I'm talking like even before the movie, like the actual Snow White, to this, and use it to give the nostalgia in the movie as well as the suspense. I remember watching a production of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and it was definitely a lot different from what the original was. So obviously, if you build something up with that, and maybe even have a situation where the evil queen, she finds Snow White, but her first attempt is a failure. You definitely have that where it seems like she's going to have her, but nope, it doesn't happen. This again would show a situation where you could probably see Snow White and Grumpy have a little more chemistry, where Grumpy helps out Snow White. She thinks like, oh, you do like me. It's like, you wish that was the case. Just something like that. And then you build up to the final big climax, which is, of course, the evil, the poisoned apple. So it's kind of one of those situations where you make it very much feel like it is the olden story, but you do add some of that Disney nostalgia to it, as well as the classic nostalgia. One of my favorite scenes in the Beauty and the Beast live action remake is the fact that they added the whole deal where Beauty's father, Maurice, grabs the rose for Belle, because I remember in the original Beauty and the Beast, that was something that he actually did. So add those nice little touches in there, and you're going to have somebody from an older generation be like, oh yeah, I remember that. And you're going to have somebody from a new generation be like, huh, wonder why this happened. And an older generation person will be like, well, that was what happened in the original Snow White. You built that up like that. So that's one of the reasons why I would do that. Now, this is definitely something that is obvious, painfully obvious. I would definitely keep the funeral scene. Obviously, this happens after Snow White eats the poison apple, after the dwarves chase off the evil queen. She's dead. I would definitely, again, make that as grisly as possible without getting too much to the point where it gets to the rated R section. But just that point where you see her falling off the cliff, the rock just falls down, and you see the vultures just swooping down and circling downwards. That was enough. And honestly, I would probably just keep that like that. But keep the funeral scene in that movie. And one note that I had, make it as real and as heart-wrenching as possible. How they did it, it will never be replicated. But if you can just find a way to make it as heart-wrenching and as just emotional as possible, you are going to do something that movie wished it could do. And in all honesty, I would, the two of them maybe having a moment where Grumpy is kind of sitting there, and one of the dwarves comes up to him, and he, he finally breaks down, where he, it's one of those things where, in the original, they probably could prolong that just a bit, where, maybe Grumpy just doesn't show emotions yet. And then maybe it's just one of those situations where maybe it's a week later, maybe it's a day later, something like that, where you build that up, where he finally breaks down and he feels bad about how he treated her. Definitely do something where you kind of just make it so that you establish that connection, establish that chemistry that the two of them have. So make it as heart-wrenching and as emotional as possible. Make that scene feel like it is awake. Make every single moment from then on just as heart-wrenching and as emotional as possible. Just make it feel like the original one was a walk in the park compared to this one. Now, here is the final step, and here's the final suggestion I would have for this. This is one where it might get a little bit hazy, and it might get a little bit, quote-unquote, I guess you could say controversial, because it would feel like a quote-unquote spit in the face of the original. But when I mentioned Grumpy and Snow White having chemistry, it comes obvious that the reason why is because they end up together at the end. Now, I don't know if they can build this up like this way, but having that moment where where the prince kisses, or maybe the prince he kisses the he kisses the princess, and it seems like, oh, this is gonna be true love, this is what it's gonna be, but there comes a point where the prince starts walking away, and we see the dwarves, they're all kissing Snow White, mainly on the head, kind of like what Maleficent did in the original movie. And the final one to kiss Snow White would be Grumpy. So when she eventually comes to, the question is, Was it from the prince? Was it from the dwarves? Or was it for specifically Grumpy? That is the question that would be answered throughout that. And to be quite honest, one thing that I would have in this is that Grumpy maybe doesn't think that Snow White feels the same way for her. Maybe he thinks that, it's just natural for a princess to go with the prince. So we kind of build this situation where Grumpy tries to go back to being Grumpy, and he's a little bit more nasty than usual, but at the same time, he's making more mistakes, and he's not as focused as he was before. Just having that deal, and then in the end, we see Snow White choosing Grumpy over the prince. And maybe it's just, and to be honest, she stays with the dwarves. She lives with them. She teaches them, how to sew, how to clean, how to do stuff like that. And to be honest, we see Grumpy still have that, grumpy side, but he does have a little more of a softer spot when it comes to Snow White. So that is kind of how I would book the live action Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It is a bit of a long shot, and it is one of those things where there's some spots where there's a point where it's like, maybe this is not the direction we should go. But in all honesty, it definitely kind of develops more characters. It definitely gives the original Snow White a little bit more of a run for its money. You're adding more elements to it, such as, the demise of the huntsman. You're definitely making some parts a little more gruesome. But at the same time, you're still keeping it in the same fate that Walt Disney had when he created this movie. You're not trying to, fluff it up. You're not trying to make things completely drastic. You're just telling the story in a different way, but also staying true to the original material. That is the way that I see it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and hopefully you guys enjoy more of these that I'm sure are going to be coming up very soon. So be sure to tune in to the next edition on the Game Changer podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at RealFNGame. Let me know what you guys think. And hey, if there's one movie that you would like for me to rebook or reanimate, stuff like that, definitely let me know in the comments section below or on my Twitter page, and I will definitely look into it, and I will find a different way to change it up. So I've been NateFNGreat. You've been listening to the Game Changer. You can always listen to us on so many different podcast forums. And I will talk to you guys in the next episode, because we're looking to make a change one day at a time. Bye-bye.